Hello, welcome to RIT 101, Compare and Contrast Essay Prezi. Why? As a student, you'll encounter many different kinds of writing assignments, each with its own requirements. One of the most common is the compare and contrast essay, in which you focus on the ways in which certain things or ideas are similar to and or different from one another. In terms of thinking about practical reasons for comparing and contrasting, or why would this be an important skill? Well, honestly, when you compare and contrast subjects, you learn to analyze them. You learn to explain how and why a subject exists. You develop your critical thinking skills, and it also helps with decision making. I have asked that you read a short story, watch a movie based on the short story, and then compare and contrast those elements in an essay. By thinking about both subjects in relation to one another, you tend to understand each of them more clearly. So deciding what similarities and differences to focus on. Next, you must decide which of the details are interesting, important, and relevant enough to be included in your paper. Ask yourself these questions. What's interesting and informative? What matters to the argument you are going to make? Overall, what's more important, the similarities or the differences? Think about the rhetorical situation, the purpose. Ask yourself why you are writing this essay. Why should your reader care? Are you taking a position? Is the movie or story better when it comes to developing themes? Think about your reader, me. How will you enrich my understanding of the two topics? Your thesis. The thesis of your compare and contrast paper is very important. It can help you create a focused argument and give your reader a roadmap so she or he does not get lost in a sea of points you are about to make.
One of the most common types of academic essay you'll have to write is the comparison contrast essay, where you'll be asked to talk about the similarities and differences of two subjects. Now, it probably won't be as easy as comparing two cities. You'll probably have to compare something like two theories or two characters in two totally different novels. The most important thing to remember with comparison is to avoid the obvious. If you have two subjects that are very similar, of course, it's easy to focus on similarities, but it's probably more interesting to try to focus on the differences. Now, before we talk about the essay structure, it's important to mention that you should probably watch the video on basic essay structure first, okay? So the comparison contrast essay introduction is basically the same as the other essays we've discussed. The hook will engage the reader and introduce both subjects, which is very important. The background will give any essential information that the reader needs to understand the main point of the essay. And then the thesis statement will focus the comparison for the reader. Now, I'll mention something about thesis statements in a moment. The main difference between the comparison contrast essay and the other essays that we've discussed is that you have options with this kind of essay. There are really two different options that you can choose from. The first one is what we call the block method, which means you have two body paragraphs that are organized in this fashion. You can have a similarities differences essay, which means you have one paragraph that is entirely focused on the similarities between these two subjects, and one paragraph that is entirely focused on the differences between the two subjects, making sure that each paragraph has a clear topic sentence. Another form of the block essay is what you might call a subject-to-subject essay, which in one paragraph gives all the information about one subject. In the next paragraph, it focuses entirely on subject B. Okay, so that's one option. The second option, and in my opinion the slightly more interesting of the two, is what we call the point-by-point comparison contrast essay, where instead of focusing only on similarities and differences, you choose two or more points of comparison. Now, If, for example, you were comparing two restaurants, certain points that you could use to compare them would be atmosphere, menu, service, and so on. So in the point-by-point body, each paragraph focuses on one point, either with the similarities or the differences. So, for example, in that essay about restaurants, paragraph 1 would focus entirely on the atmosphere of both restaurants. Paragraph 2 could focus entirely on the service at both of those restaurants and how they are similar or different. After you've done that, of course, you have your conclusion, which is the same as pretty much all essays that we've talked about. You want to summarize your main points, and you want to end with a final statement to leave the reader with a lasting impression, perhaps a final opinion. Now, the most important part to keep in mind about the point-by-point essay is that whatever points you're discussing in your body have to be mentioned in the thesis statement. Now, with the block method, the thesis statement could be slightly more general, but if I were to write an essay about the restaurants and my points were atmosphere and service, I have to make sure to include the words atmosphere and service in my thesis statement. So that's basic comparison-contrast essay structure. If you want to practice comparison-contrast, follow the link at the end of this video.
All right. Also, in terms of your thesis, think about the list of details of similarities and differences when you are analyzing both the short story and the movie. Also consider the questions you answered for last week's assignment. Basically, your thesis will be you writing a sentence stating the core of what you learned about the two subjects. Whereas the movie and the story can seem similar, they are different in several ways, particularly the ending in terms of the theme of hope. So think clearly, think deeply about them. Use skills of analysis to come up with an amazing thesis. I will also include as a resource how to write a thesis for compare and contrast. All right, in terms of organizing your paper, you need to decide how you want to organize your essay. Generally, subject by subject works better for short essays. Trait by trait is better for longer essays. If you want to do, let's say, subject by subject, let's say the characters, perhaps you want to delve deeper into the fact that in the short story, Red, one of the main characters, is white with red hair and he's Irish. But in the movie, he was portrayed as a black man. So perhaps you want to think a little bit deeper about that. If you choose trait by trait, maybe you want to focus on themes like hope and friendship, and you can write your essay in that form. But it's the same as any other essay in the fact that you have an introduction, a body, and when you write the body, it's either going to be subject by subject or trait by trait, and then you'll end with the conclusion to tie up loose ends and restate your thesis. To be honest, there are no hard and fast rules about organizing a comparison-contrast paper. Just be sure that your reader can easily tell what's going on, because that's the whole point of writing. You are sharing your ideas with somebody else in an attempt to get your points across, and you need to do so in a way that's clear, concise, and well organized. There are some keywords and tips that you can use to help your reader keep track of where you are in a compare and contrast essay. You'll want to be sure that your transitions and topic sentences are especially strong. Your thesis should give the reader an idea of the traits or points you will be making and the organization you will be using. But you can help him or her out with some extra cues. And here are some examples. Words like, some, both, the same as. Those are words that compare. Words that contrast, even though, instead, on the other hand. So that's it. I will post this video and another video that will help you in terms of comparing and contrasting books against their movie counterparts on our website. Good luck!